Now welcome to another lightning response video. Once again, I'll try to do several questions here, and I'll kick it off with this one from Chris Davis, who asked, Hey Thor, I enjoy your channel. Do you think the sequel trilogy would have been less hated if The Rise of Skywalker did a partial retcon of The Last Jedi? If they had brought Luke Skywalker back for The Rise of Skywalker and revealed he had been somewhere else and that the Luke Skywalker we got in The Last Jedi was a clone suffering from clone madness, stealing the idea from the Thrawn trilogy. I know Disney likely would have never considered that, but I think it would have worked. And first of all, I agree with you that I don't think Disney and Lucasfilm ever considered doing something quite like that, mainly because I think if you did do that, you are basically, as you suggest, retconning The Last Jedi pretty much entirely. You're making that movie utterly irrelevant if you say that wasn't even the real Luke Skywalker, he was just a crazy clone of Luke. All the themes and messages about letting go of the past and failure being a great teacher and all of that Rian Johnson tried to wonderfully inject into that film for us become kind of a moot point, if you will. So I don't think they ever considered doing that. Now, if they had, I do wonder how people would have reacted because, of course, those who liked The Last Jedi would have been angry. There would have been a big fuss in the media about how they listened to the haters, especially at the time when the media really cared about Star Wars and the haters and how ist and phobic some of the fans were and all of that. That has certainly lessened over time as Star Wars has lessened in popularity, you could say. But if they had done that, I think there is a big media backlash against them for caving into them. And I don't know that the people who really hated The Last Jedi would have actually appreciated that. I mean, maybe. It's hard to go back and put yourself into that frame of mind or into that time period where everybody was just ripping on Star Wars and how bad The Last Jedi was and asking actually for something like this to have Luke Skywalker wake up from a bad dream or to have it be a clone. But if they had actually done that, I think people just laugh at them. I don't know. Maybe they actually somehow save it and make a great movie out of The Rise of Skywalker or call it something different and just make it an entirely different movie, obviously. I mean, I think what is almost ironic here is that, as a lot of you probably have heard, there was going to be a movie called The Hunt for Ben Solo, where Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, whatever we want to call him, was going to come back from the dead. And if you have forgotten or you never seen it, at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, he does fade away, not unlike how, well, Obi-Wan Kenobi has faded and other Jedi, Yoda has faded, but how Luke faded away at the end of The Last Jedi, implying that if Ben Solo can come back from the nether realm of the Force, why couldn't have Luke Skywalker have come back? Even we've heard in the script, in the story they came up with, that Lucasfilm approved of, that Kennedy, Filoni, Carrie Beck, all of the bigwigs at Lucasfilm itself had approved of, that they said they had given an explanation for his return, and when they gave the script to Disney, somehow Disney didn't understand it because they're like, well, he's supposed to be dead, but you can understand Disney's confusion, even though they claim they had put an explanation in there. Anyway, my point is apparently there is a way to come back from the dead that Lucasfilm was ready to approve of, and I mean back from the dead for a Jedi. We've seen other characters coming back from the dead, but you know what I'm saying. They had an idea for Ben Solo. I guess we can't call him a Jedi at that point, but that someone who had become a Force ghost could return to the living Force, and so you could have, in theory, done that with Luke in The Rise of Skywalker, or whatever we wanted to call it, and try to fix the mistakes of The Last Jedi. I don't think it would have been impossible with Episode 9 that tried to repair some of the damage. I don't know if people would have just laughed at the attempt, or if it had been really good, maybe they accept it. It's hard to, again, go back in time and just remember how you thought and felt or what you actually wanted out of Disney and Lucasfilm at that time if you would have been willing to accept an apology movie, I guess. Anyway, I tend to think if they would have immediately course corrected in the next movie and brought back Luke Skywalker, yes, there would have been people who chuckled at that. But I do think maybe they could have salvaged it if they had brought the real Luke Skywalker in for the final movie of the Skywalker saga. And maybe he is a part of stopping Palpatine, assuming he has still come back, assuming they didn't come up with a better idea than bringing him back, which it's hard to say what you do because you still need a main villain in that final movie. Anyway, getting to the point, closing this question out, I do think it could have worked. I just think it's unlikely anything they did to try to bring back Luke would have been taken seriously. I think people just laugh at them no matter what they try at that point. All right, and moving on, we now have a question here from Michael Thomas, who asked, Hey Thor, what is your opinion on was Anakin supposed to destroy the Jedi versus he was supposed to destroy the Sith and Jedi both, and what is your opinion on both? And though there are certainly some people out there who believe he was supposed to destroy the Jedi and the Sith and that somehow brought about balance, in all reality, he was only supposed to destroy the Sith. I've talked many times before about how Jedi do not cause imbalance. That's not how it works in Star Wars. What imbalance is in Star Wars is the dark side growing too strong and eclipsing the light, which was what was kind of happening in the prequels. Palpatine had risen to power. The Jedi could not see him. He was hiding right under their nose, and he ultimately destroyed them and plunged the galaxy into darkness. And George Lucas has talked about how it was kind of the Jedi's fault that they had become, as even mentioned by Yoda in the movies, they had become arrogant, they had become too full of themselves, they were under the influence of the Republic too much, they were taking their orders from the Republic instead of just following the will of the Force. They were literally taking their orders from a Sith Lord, from Palpatine himself, and couldn't recognize the threat right in front of their noses. And so what I think was supposed to happen is Anakin was supposed to destroy the Sith, and that would have shown the Jedi how vulnerable they were, that, oh my goodness, Palpatine was there the whole time, a Sith was there the whole time, and we didn't even notice. We have to change our ways. We have to course correct, because there being light and no dark does not cause imbalance. That is not how it works in Star Wars. And you could maybe make an argument that way too much a light side could be a problem, because I do think compassion taken to the very extreme, and compassion is what drives the Jedi. That is what they're trying to be. They're trying to be compassionate to all, as Anakin talks about in Attack of the Clones. But taken to the very extreme, you could argue compassion becomes control, because the person or the people you're being compassionate towards, they could become 100% dependent on you to the point where they are just doing whatever you want them to do, or whatever they think, say, the Jedi would want them to do in order to not lose their compassion, right? Whatever the Jedi are giving them or doing for them, or whatever whoever is doing for them, they don't want to lose that. So they have basically lost their free will in order to appease the people who take care of them. All right, and next up, we have a question here from Hawking Jim, who asked, "Hey Thor, I've noticed this trend where some fans are really hesitant to let go of the Skywalker saga. What's going on there? Ideally, we'd have the best writers, the most talented animators, and the right people on board to create something fresh and exciting. Yet it looks like there are still plenty of folks who want to cling to the Skywalker timeline. I totally understand that many believe the sequels need to be removed as part of the canon. However, I doubt the next head of Lucasfilm will go down that road. If that's the case, the only option left might be to kick off a completely new era." And I think I tend to see most people willing to let go of the Skywalker era. I think there are certainly some who think that is Star Wars. That is the only thing that is ever going to be Star Wars, or true Star Wars, is the Skywalker saga. And like I've said before, I can kind of understand that. I get if you only see the George Lucas movies or even the original trilogy as the ultimate or definitive version of Star Wars, and everything else is something not quite Star Wars. However, from my point of view, I have consumed many stories that don't include the Skywalkers or are very far outside of that time period, and it's still Star Wars to me. It still feels like Star Wars to me, so I don't personally have any sort of issue with that. In fact, I've argued that what Lucasfilm and Disney need to do is kind of what you're suggesting. They need to create a whole new era of Star Wars. And I'm not just talking going back and trying to do the High Republic, or even trying to go back and do the Old Republic, though I think that could work. They could carve their own little time period out of there and make something of it. I think they should go into the future a few hundred years or 1,000 years. And like I've said before, at that point, you don't even have to definitively say what is the real history of the galaxy. Was it the sequel trilogy? Was it what the EU did? You just say that a Skywalker saved the galaxy 1,000 years ago and leave it at that, and they rebuilt the Jedi Order. Is that Luke Skywalker? Is it Rey Skywalker? That is 100% up to you. But anyway, you make a new time period, you try to keep it rather linear instead of just jumping all over the place like they have been doing recently with one show like Andor, for example, is set before the original trilogy, and then you're doing the Ahsoka series, which is set after Return of the Jedi and in the Mando period. And then there's going to be Starfighter, which is set after the sequels, and then they're going to have Maul Shadow Lord, which is set right after the prequels. You have the shows just jumping all over the timeline. What you do, you start a new time period again 1,000 years in the future. You make everything pretty much linear, where one show or movie takes place after the other. I think that's something the MCU does rather well, where your audience expects one movie to essentially take place after the next one, even though that doesn't always work that way. But anyway, I love the Skywalker saga. Those movies, the George Lucas movies, will always be the truest form of Star Wars to me, even though I don't think of other Star Wars as not being Star Wars, if you get what I'm saying there. But I do think it is time to move on. I think it's time to just move away from them and do something new and different. Now, will Disney get that right? Well, as you suggest, hire the best people for it, which kind of brings us to our next question and final question for this video, and it comes to us from MC's Creations, who asked, "Hey Thor, what about Timothy Zahn or Tony Gilroy as president of Lucasfilm? Who would you vote for?" And as much as I enjoyed Andor, I would absolutely vote for Timothy Zahn, because Timothy Zahn is more of a Star Wars guy than Tony Gilroy, as I've said before, and this isn't meant as some sort of backhanded compliment or insult or whatever. But I think Andor just naturally falls into Star Wars. I think it is a story that, yes, could fit into other franchises or stand all on its own. But I think Andor just naturally works extremely well in Star Wars, and if he were in charge of all of Star Wars, I don't know how well Tony Gilroy would do. Not doubting his talent or skill as a creator or anything like that, but I think Timothy Zahn has proven he can jump into the unknown and create amazing Star Wars. He is the guy who, in my opinion, launched the EU with the Heir to the Empire trilogy. He is the guy who took us post-sequel trilogy and created an amazing story, which was the foundation of many more stories to come. Furthermore, in more recent times, he has taken us into the unknown regions. He has taken us and shown us the Chiss Ascendancy and created a kind of different Star Wars within the Star Wars galaxy, because in his newest trilogy of books, we are again taken into the unknown regions where there is the chaos, where it's not easy to travel through hyperspace, and there are Skywalkers. I know it's a funny name, but there are Skywalkers that can help guide ships through the chaos, and there are a whole new different species, a whole new political backdrop. There's the Grisk, there's all these new things, and it still feels like Star Wars while also feeling kind of like its own thing at the same time. So to me, he has proven he could take Star Wars in a new direction while keeping it Star Wars, so he would 1000% get my vote as president of Lucasfilm. All right, that is going to be all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think about any of these questions, or answer them for yourself. What do you think would have happened if Lucasfilm decided and Disney decided that with Episode 9, we're going to bring back Luke Skywalker from the dead or from another realm of the Force, or imply that it had only been a clone and the real Luke had been gone the whole time? Or you can, of course, ask a question for a future lightning response video. All you got to do, start your comment off with "Hey Thor," ask your question. I try to answer it in a future video. Whatever the case may be, though, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.